Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah Sperber. I am a realtor in the Northern Nevada market. And on today's video, I'm actually going to be speaking to you more as a parent than I am a realtor, though I can help you with all your real estate needs too. We'll get to that at the end. But I'm going to tell you a little bit of a personal story. Very recently, I transitioned my daughter from public school, and we're going to be starting private school next fall. And I'm going to tell you kind of all about my journey and my reasoning. And if you stay until the end, I'm going to tell you which of these schools I actually personally selected to send my daughter to. So make sure you watch to the end. So, I'm going to preface this video with the fact that if you didn't know this, our state is pretty terribly ranking as far as nationwide for academics and education. I'm going to read you this little blurb. I just had to pause filming and look it up. So, and I'll tell you, where these are from. But as of 2024, Nevada ranks very low in elementary education. It is positioned 48th 48th overall in K through 12 education, according to a variety of measures such as student achievement, school quality, and safety. This is from the World Population Review and the Nevada Globe. Specifically, Nevada ranks 35th in academic achievement, 35th, but falls to 50th overall when considering the broader aspects of K through 12 education. This indicates significant challenges in the state's education system, impacting not only elementary education, but the entire K through 12 spectrum. You're probably hearing this, and if you're somebody who's thinking about moving here, you're probably like, well, that might be a deal breaker, and I feel you. My daughter is 7. She's finishing first grade and going into second in the fall. So when she was starting school, we were looking at all the options for kindergarten. It became a full-time job because I literally went to every charter school. And honestly, it's such a personal decision and it truly depends on the actual student. You have to do what's right for your family. So I'm sharing this literally as just my own experience. So don't come for me, internet. This is just what I went through and the decision that I made. And I'm kind of getting a little bit more personal than I normally do on here. But I just, as a parent and as a mom, I just want to share with you kind of what I went through. The issue that I found with those is that our population has increased so drastically and so fast that now every school is basically on a lottery system if you're not going to go to the school that you're zoned for. You need to be through the application process for all of these schools in February, the February before. So just know that if you're moving here from out of state or if you have a kid who's kind of on that age of going into kindergarten next year, you're going to want to start the process very early, start researching. Private school's expensive. A lot of these places do offer scholarships, they offer financial aid. So if that is something that, if you're really set on sending your kid or kids to private school, you can explore those options. Each one kind of has different requirements and different offerings. So you're going to want to look into that. I'm not going to really get into a lot of that today, but I did tour a whole lot. I'm going to tell you the experience that I had at each one of these tours. So again, this is personal experience and insight. Do not take this as factual information. Please don't come for me. And, different strokes for different folks. If you decide that one of the schools we decided against is right for you, that's great. If public school is the best option for your student, that's great. But this is just the decision that I made. So preface all of this with the reason that I decided to pull her from public school. She just was not being challenged. And okay, I get it. There are certain metrics where within our state, kids have to be in school a certain number of days, otherwise they get reported to the state and held back, and truancy comes into play and all this stuff. But my kid's in first grade. She did miss a lot of school. But what was most alarming to me was that despite having missed way more than what's allowed in the state, she's still getting straight A's. She's got perfect grades. She started telling me, Mom, I'm bored in school. And we all know what happens to kids who are bored. I was one of them. You don't want that for your child. You want them to continuously be growing and evolving and learning new things and trying new things and kind of having this like stretch growth. So that was kind of like our impetus for looking into the private school sector in our community. The other thing you should know, if you don't live here or if private school territory is like new to you, 80 to 90% of private schools in Reno and Sparks are religious based. I'm just going to go through the list of all the schools that I visited and kind of my experience, things that I noticed, and, kind of what those tours uncovered for me. And maybe my experience will be helpful to you. One of the first places I looked at was Faith Academy. This is a brand new school. Obviously, from the name, you're probably gathering that it is a religious based program. This program actually shares part of a church building. It's an older building. I mean, it was cute and sweet, but the building itself was very run down. They're a very, very new school. And the principal could not have been any nicer. You could tell she was super passionate. She started this whole school by herself and jumped through all the hoops to get it up and running. In my opinion, I just kind of felt like they're so new and it was so small. They only have a couple of grades running. And so the opportunity that we were offered was that despite my daughter being at the age and has finished kinder and first, she would have been entering second grade. They're like, well, we're not actually running a second grade class because we don't have enough students, but we would put her in third grade and kind of work with her on the side to catch her up. So she would basically be skipping a grade. And in my head, I was like, well, that's kind of cool in some ways because she is academically advanced. It just felt a little bit iffy. Like, I don't know, if they work out, that's great. I could tell the passion was there and it seemed like a very sweet place to be, but it just didn't feel like the right fit. Another thing to note about Faith Academy is that it's not accredited yet. I know that the principal mentioned that they're working towards that, but it is a lengthy process and they are not accredited. So that's something that just, I don't know, didn't quite sit right in my mind. Another place that I visited is called King's Academy. This is also in Northwest Reno. It's a great little neighborhood, super cute campus and building. The class sizes were really small, which I thought is a huge plus because that means each student's getting more attention. There would have only been 6 other kids in her class, which is great compared to public school. Like the class she's in right now where she's finishing up, she's one of 27 students. Granted, there is a full-time teacher's aide, so there are 2 like adults in the room, but that's still like a huge class for a teacher to adequately teach and tailor assignments to and all that. Like you really just can't get that in the public school sector in our community. Another pro to King's Academy was the tuition. It's between 7 and 8,000, which if you're looking in the private school sector, they do get very costly. So anything under like 10 grand is pretty affordable, you might say. So that was a plus compared to the other options. Because there were only 6 other students, there were a lot of open spaces. So I put that in the pros column just because it gave us a lot of time to kind of evaluate and make a decision. Whereas other places that we looked, they were like, there's one spot open, you've got to grab it or else we're giving it to the next person. So I hate being rushed with such a big decision. It was nice to be assured, like, we'll be here. If you make a bunch of other tour appointments and look at other places and you decide that we're the right fit, you can come back in several weeks and you're most likely still going to have a spot. Now I'm going to touch on a couple of the cons of King's Academy. There weren't really that many. One was that there really isn't any flexibility for students to move around between grade levels. And in the case of my daughter, she's finishing first grade, but she's reading and doing math at like a 4th grade level. And they kind of said, well, she'll be in a class where everyone happens to be kind of overperforming and outperforming the core curriculum for that grade. So she'll be well positioned and surrounded by peers who are also academically advanced. But as far as like having that actual flexibility within the school, we don't really offer that. For me, that was kind of like maybe it would work out, but to not be given the opportunity to grow, that's really what I was seeking in moving from public to private school, if that makes sense. The other reason that I chose not to pursue King's Academy is because it is evangelical, which I have no qualms with religion or anybody's personal choices. If that is, your religion or whatever. Like, I'm not against it. I have nothing bad to say. I'm trying to be like really neutral about that. But as far as that being a huge piece of the academics within a school setting, I just decided that that really wasn't in line with what I wanted for my daughter. I just felt like for that reason, if we weren't finding exactly what we were looking for within the curriculum, paired with the fact that it was like a whole separate religion, I just didn't know if that was really going to be aligned with what I was seeking. We're going to move on to Riverview Academy. This campus was mind blowing. Like, literally, of every place I looked, this was the nicest campus by far. You drive up this huge hill along the river, like, you have mountain views in every direction. It was absolutely breathtaking. And then it's gated. To get in, you had to like hit a keypad and talk to a person, and the gate lifts and you go in and it closes behind you. It felt super safe and secure, but not only that, it just felt really beautiful. Like, it was quintessential, like, private school in the mountains, if you will. Some of the major pros about this school is that I loved the principal. She could not have been any sweeter, but one of the coolest things about this school was that she actually teaches. She has a whole grade of her own. A lot of people would say, oh, well, she's like divided and not focused on one thing or another, but I also think that there's no better way for the people at the top to understand what the needs are kind of on the ground without having feet on the ground. So I thought that that was a huge plus. I loved that she seemed to know every student's name, their story. I mean, she spent plenty of time with me. I didn't feel rushed. And like I said, she could not have been any sweeter. This school runs Monday through Friday, but every Friday is a half day. I actually found that this is really common amongst a lot of the private schools. A lot of them do a half day on Friday, which I think makes a lot of sense. Then you're rolling right into the weekend. Another thing that I liked about this school was that while religion is part of their environment and culture and some of the academics, they do adhere to core curriculum, which is not religious or faith-based. So the kids are getting adequate reading, writing, math, all the things that you get in normal school, but to a higher degree because it is private. While they only have elementary school now, they are working on expanding to middle and high school, which would mean that by the time my daughter was entering the higher grades, that they may have room for her there. Having kids kind of like move together through all the grades could be very beneficial. So that was a pro. Let's talk about some of the cons of the Riverview Academy. Like I mentioned, the religious piece of the programming there is in addition to the core curriculum, but the more I explored that option, the more I just felt like it should be separate from the academic environment. These schools are really put in place for people who are passionate about their faith and passionate about having faith be part of their child's education. And while I don't have an issue with that, it just didn't seem like the right fit for me and my family. Aside from that, because the school is so small, they have blended classrooms. So they have first and second grade together, which would mean that my daughter going in as a second grader would be in a classroom with a grade below her. For me, thinking about like her being academically advanced and the issue that I'm facing currently is that she's not being adequately challenged, I just felt like that wasn't necessarily the best choice. I really wanted to get this right. I don't want to be moving her around schools, changing schools like we're changing socks. Like, I just wanted to find the right ideal environment for her, move her one time, and have that be the end of it until she hits high school. Let's change gears. So those are some of the faith-based schools that I looked at. I looked at a lot of options, you guys. Like, I like to look at every option and then make like the ultimate decision and just go wholeheartedly in that direction. So another option that I explored was the Nevada Sage Waldorf School. If you are not familiar with Waldorf education, it is a very, very different philosophy. So instead of looking at like academic benchmarks, Rudolf Steiner, who created Waldorf education, kind of believed that there's like a holistic spiritual self, and the way that people develop are through the mind, body, spirit connection, and not necessarily by like getting good grades and learning to read at a certain time. And that like the beginning of a student's life and journey is really rooted in play. And so they go about teaching things in a whole different way than traditional academic institutions. For example, when I visited the school, the class that Sophia would be joining, they were jumping rope and doing their multiplication tables, 3, 6, 9, and that's how they were learning. It was like this whole like rhythmic connection. They do a lot of arts in Waldorf education. They have this whole subject called handwork. And so in certain grades, they will actually like make their own knitting needles from pieces of wood. They will knit, they will crochet. What else? They learn to sew. They learn all of these tactile trades, so to speak, because Rudolf Steiner really believed that there is problem solving and connection to real world applications through handwork. And honestly, if you didn't know this about me, I went to art school. So I actually tend to agree with a lot of that. My issue with that is that Sophia is coming from 2 years of normal education. Yes, she is artistic and creative and all of the things, but she's also in first grade now reading at a fourth grade level. And in Steiner school, they don't start reading until first grade. So the kids that would be her peers, so to speak, they're all just starting to learn to read. And she's already like grades and grades ahead. So I did have some concerns about what would that transition look like. And then also my concern with Waldorf education is like, what does the transition look like from leaving Waldorf and going to like a normal high school? So those were things that I thought about. I did talk to the principal because honestly, I'm going to be really honest. I like this school so much more than I thought I was going to. In my mind, I was like, oh man, maybe this is an option. The thing that she told me that kind of resonated was the principal was that students who go through Waldorf education, they're not like tested to like a standardized testing, institutionalized normal academic standard, but they are taught how to creatively problem solve. They're taught kind of like how to think about things, not like what to think, if that makes sense. She would also learn Spanish there, which obviously, as I mentioned before, is something that's largely gone away in public schools in our community, which is such a bummer. I feel like, I mean, in the school I went to, we had the choice of Spanish or French, and a lot of other schools also had Mandarin and other various offerings. I think German. I think it's really important developmentally for kids to be introduced to other languages at a young age. I also had a little peek at some of the projects that these students were making, and they were honestly very impressive, very different from what you would see in just a normal academic setting. They were a lot more in depth and a lot more creative, a lot more visual, a lot more expressive. So I have to say, I was going into this thinking, this isn't going to be the place for us. It's a little too woo woo. It's a little too out there, but I actually liked it a lot more than I thought I would. I also felt like everyone there was so relaxed and calm. And I think in a lot of ways that might be good for my daughter because she's always around me who's like, go, 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 do the homework, finish this, finish that. And like, it might be a good balance, but that's something to keep in mind. It's definitely a certain type or breed of person that would go there or would send their kids there. And I'm not saying anything negative about it, but it is like a very specific kind of education. Let's move on to Brookfield. If you live here, you've for sure heard of this school. Brookfield is, so they told me on the tour, among the top 15% academically in the entire nation, that's an impressive statistic, right? So my expectations there on out from like the moment the woman told me that through the rest of the tour were like very high. I'm like, wow, this place has to be like really something to be in the top 15% in the country. Well, I don't know that it really achieved that for me, but I'm going to continue. So stay with me. The location is nice. That was one of the pros. It's in the southwest part of Reno, which is, if you watch any of my real estate videos, you know that's among the most desirable parts of town. It felt secure. It's fenced in. There's like fobs and stuff to access. So it felt safe, which I liked. As far as being one of the most expensive schools in Reno, I had a much higher expectation for what that campus was actually going to be like and look like and feel like. I actually felt like the buildings and the facilities themselves were kind of run down and not super clean. I mean, I get it. Like, I'm a clean freak and that's my own problem, but like for the amount they're charging for tuition, which was well over $17,000 per year, I was expecting like spotless. And you know what? Being old and historic and whatever else, that's not an issue to me if something's well maintained and well kept. I feel the same way with real estate. Sometimes older homes are far more charming and far more desirable than something brand new that's like made from cheap materials, So that's not really what I'm saying. It didn't feel super clean. It felt like things were kind of falling apart. I did some digging on the internet, which who knows? You can find anything you're really looking for on the internet, right? But a lot of people said that they always have plumbing issues and this and that. And like, there were a lot of unhappy campers who had gone through with it and sent their kids to Brookfield. I delved into some of the cons, but I do have more pros for you. So every student at Brookfield learns violin, which is epic. I mean, that's freaking cool to learn not only an instrument, but violin. I mean, that's pretty like specialized, and the people who teach it are super professional. They also get professional art classes from a working, practicing artists in town. Having that side of your brain developed when you're young helps with so many things that are unrelated to actually making art. It helps with creative problem solving. It helps with kind of articulating yourself and your expression. And I think there's a lot of value there, especially in the younger grades. So I think that's a huge selling point for Brookfield. These students have the option of learning either Spanish or Mandarin, both of which would be super useful and applicable, moving forward in career paths or whatever. So I think that's great. They also have a 1 p.m. release on Fridays and a significantly longer summer break than most schools in Reno. Let's talk about the cons. So I was expecting for the tuition, for the high ranking academic standards that they have, I was expecting very small class sizes, and all of the teachers and professionals in the building would be like really polished people. And that's just not what I found. The class sizes were big, and the classrooms themselves were tiny. Like, kids were like on top of each other. And it almost felt like, honestly, the classroom my daughter's in right now in a public charter school felt cleaner, bigger, more colorful, like more put together. Like, I was expecting the world when I entered these classrooms, and that's just not what I found in any of them. And I looked at multiple grades at this school. You guys have waited this long. This has been probably one of my longest videos to date, but obviously kids are the heartstrings, and that's where we go deep and passion driven with everything that we do, right? So as a parent, I understand that. I am going to tell you the school that we chose and tell you all the pros and cons and our reasons for choosing this school. So thank you for being so patient. Da da da! The winner was Triad. The school itself is beautiful. I mean, it's expensive, there's that, but from the moment you walk in, you can kind of see where like every penny's going. Like, it's clean, it's beautiful, it's well designed, it's very stimulating, and like it feels like a very creative space. Everything's colorful, everything is cohesive. Another thing that I really loved about Triad were the small class sizes. My daughter will be going into a class of 9 students total. Their philosophy is basically that a student shouldn't really be kept in a grade or like in a group because that's their age or whatever. That's what the law says. Like, your students should be met where they're at and then encouraged to grow from there. They have, for example, like math happens at the same time for every grade. So if your student is testing at a 1st grade level or an 8th grade level, they can participate in that class. And it's like that for every subject. So they get a super customized education for every subject, which I think is just amazing, because some people are more right brain, left brain, mathematic, language, whatever. They have their strengths, and this curriculum really allows a customizable setting for each individual student, which I loved. I just feel like putting her in an environment with, only 8 other kids, that gives her a much better opportunity to have one-on-one time with her teachers. The only cons at this school were really the price tag. It is ungodly expensive. The other thing that was difficult was that it is such a small school, and they are so selective with who they let in, that there was only one space available, and there was another family ahead of us who they came in and did the trial day too. And it actually turned out that their student was not a good fit personality wise and was going to be moved into a different class. So when the spot opened up, they said, you can have it if you want, but you need to decide like by the end of the week. That put a lot of pressure on me. Although by that point, like the rest of their process had been so in depth that by the time we were given the option to make a choice, we were already so sure that that was our first choice. So she's going to start there in the fall. So as soon as, I get the a feel for it and kind of understand what it's actually like in a real time, real setting, I will let you guys know. But hopefully, I'm really hopeful that this was the right choice. It only goes till eighth grade, so I'm going to have to make some update videos later on when we get through middle school and start looking into high school. That was a whole lot of information, a lot of personal information. I don't normally go into like my own personal life on here, so this is new for me, but thanks for tuning in. And of course, if you guys have any further questions about my experience, or if you have any real estate questions, that's really what I do all day. So I'm a realtor in the Northern Nevada market. If you're looking to buy or sell or form a strategy around either one of those things, you can book a free call with me. There's a link to do that in the description box below. It's just a time for us to connect, figure out what your situation is, and help you devise your next and best steps. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like and that subscribe button. I put out new videos every single week about the Northern Nevada lifestyle, the Reno Sparks housing market, and of course, all things to do with buying and selling real estate. Thanks so much for watching, you guys, and I'll see you next time.